The Jazz have a new GM. Why? Who is he? What does it mean for the future? And where is it important? That, plus some more conversation about Paul Millsap. And when time permits, I get to your questions and thoughts. It's all coming up on today's edition of Tip Off. Boom, 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 boom. It landed on the green, about pin high, a little bit above. Boom, 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 boom. It rolled down. We watched it. Ooh, it's close. Boom, boom, boom. It's gone. It's gone. It's a hole in one. Ah! Boom, 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 boom. Except for the fact it was my 12th shot on the hole. It doesn't really count as a hole in one, and therefore it's not really a hole in one. Boom, 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 boom. How are you? Jazz sponsor golf tournament yesterday. It was a great deal of fun. What we were at Willow Creek, and what I do, because I want to see everybody, is I just sit one hole, and every group comes through, and I hit their first ball for them and take their first putt for them on the hole in the scramble format. And Craig Bullerjack's group came in, and having taken about 12 shots at that green, I was pretty dialed into what the right club was, and boom, went and watched it and rolled and went in. Kind of weird, because your first reaction is like, oh my gosh, hole in one, and then your second reaction is, no, it really isn't a hole in one at all. So that was funky, but it was cool, and I agree. I tweeted it out, but it's not a hole in one, but it was neat at least. I've never seen it happen before. We'll get to the GM thing. The Jazz sponsor golf tournament's a cool event. It's all the primary major sponsors to the Jazz, which really is what allows this team to exist. And it's nice to see those people, and you feel a pretty good, strong connection to them. And without them, the organization isn't what it is. But it's also nice to see. I don't know what every organization does, and we do things differently. But it's a nice event. There's a huge amount of swag that goes out to show appreciation. Nice lunch afterwards where Greg Miller and Kevin OConnor talk. Every group is usually paired with some type of Jazz front office or salesperson or something of that sort, broadcaster. So it's a nice, O'Connor's cruising around. He hit a nice shot. So it's nice. There's a lot. It's a good event. I think it's a nice sign of what the Jazz do with the community. It's a nice sign of how connected the community is to the Jazz, which are the little things behind the wins and losses and all the things that probably don't matter to you in a great deal, but probably matter much more than any of us realize. So it was nice. The other thing I would say was just how different it was. A year ago, you just knew you weren't playing opening day, and you wondered if you were ever playing. And I remember Greg was very forthright in that meeting, and you were worrying, oh my gosh, did you just get fined? And now this year it's, hey, which guy do you like best, Mo, Marvin, or Randy? And what do you think of this? And it was just great. And can we get Jimmer? Yeah, I had that guy. That guy was there. The Jimmer guy was there. He's coming. He's coming. I saw him. He told me he's getting traded to the Jazz or the Mavericks. He's not getting traded to the Jazz. Not working out. And as I've said before, I think that's the worst thing that happened to Jimmer. But let's get to the important stuff. The Utah Jazz at 10 a.m. today, 3 hours from now, will announce, according to all reports, a new general manager. His name is Dennis Lindsey. Let's go to why. What this really is, from my understanding, is an adding of depth to the front office. The Jazz were currently structured with Kevin O'Connor as both executive vice president of basketball operations and general manager. He then had Walt Perrin below him, who was director of player personnel. And then after that, it was Richard Smith, who's director of some college scouting. You had Richard Shebrooks, who's the foreign guy, and you have advanced scout Dave Fredman. And then Jefferson Sweeney's the video coordinator, who really works much more with game-to-game, day-to-day stuff than he does in the scouting department. So it was a 5-man staff. Nobody new on the staff other than Shebrooks since Walt Perrin in 2001. And they wanted to add some depth, and they wanted some high-level experience to that front office. So that's the first part of it. The second part is, and I'm pretty good friends with some of these GMs around the league. I mean, it's the world I live in. That wasn't some like name-dropping comment. It's just I know these guys. It's brutal. It's brutal. And interestingly, one of the guys I'm close with stepped away this year, and I've talked to him twice since, and he's he suddenly now is only realizing how brutal it is and how incredibly exhaustive uh, it is. And it just comes down to, one, the pressure. Uh, and so the amount of work that goes into any decision you ever make of background work and trying to find out who everybody is. And then couple that with simply trying to uh, the amount of scouting that has to be done, the amount of travel that's been, the amount of agent conversations, the amount of issues you're dealing with. Somebody on Twitter made a great point. Like, just think about, or maybe it was on SLC Dunk. Just think about the lunacy that O'Connor's had to deal with on this stupid Raja Bell thing, and how many hours and time and effort that takes. So the Jazz were thin. O'Connor's the only one making those calls. The other guys are completely overloaded. I mean, I talked to Walt and Dave, and their schedules are nuts. So this team certainly needs a little more depth. Now, if you're going to add depth, and hopefully this allows, the vision is this allows O'Connor to still really be the decision maker, still be the visionary, still be the one who says, we're going to trade Darren 18 months earlier than anyone thinks we're going to, because we'll get more out of it and we'll move forward. This is the guy who, we're going to move Memo, and really in a heist last year, to get that trade exception. Those visionary things are still going to come from O'Connor. But what it means is that he'll have other guys doing work. So he goes to Dennis Lindsey and says, okay, this is how I think we should do it. What's the landscape feel like? Who have you talked to? Who likes what on our team? Those type of things that are coming. And so it just allows O'Connor to do his job more. It also may allow, most teams GM travels a great deal with the team. We have never been a team where our GMs travel. This may allow them to travel more with our team than it's been before, which allows another eyes and ears to what's taking place and may be really important. So that's the structure of why you do it. Now, he's a GM. And he is, and you're trying to add somebody good, and you're trying to add an experienced person. O'Connor's already the executive vice president of basketball operations, and he's classified as the general manager. Simply, I don't know this, but my guess is contractually, to be able to garner the services of one of these guys, in the case of Dennis Lindsey, other name mentioned was David Griffin, another name mentioned was Troy Weaver. Those are all high-level assistant general managers in the NBA right now. If you were going to go get those guys, what do you need to do is you have to be able to offer them a position that is more than a lateral move. Contractually, I would suspect that none of them can get out of their deal for a lateral move, nor would any of them really do it. So therefore, if you're want a guy like Dennis Lindsey, who's got the background of being with the Spurs, and you're intrigued by that and what that organization is, as everybody in the NBA seems to be right now, then you need to be offering him the GM title. So day-to-day work for O'Connor goes down. You add depth and talent into your front office staff for decision making and work, and you do it by the GM title, where really in our organization we had a gap, and that allows you to get other high-level person. I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying it's semantics because I think it's real, but to some extent O'Connor dropping the GM title I think is semantics, and that's the way you were able to get the guy you needed to get. Who is Dennis Lindsey? Lindsey started similar to O'Connor as a former college player. O'Connor was out of Virginia Tech. Lindsey was out of Baylor. This is the first time Lindsey will have left Texas. And as one of the guys I talked to in the league who I trust the most, surprised he was leaving Texas. And he still wears cowboy boots, but he probably can't. Well, we'll have to figure out where we relate in what ways to Texas. We vote generally the same. I don't know. We'll have to think about it. Anyway, Lindsey started as a high school coach, then moved to a college coach, and I really think wanted to be a coach. That's what's interesting about this guy is if you go read his bios and back articles about him and Q&As through the Rockets, and there's a good piece by Baylor. This guy really wanted to be a coach, and I'm going to sit down with him today, so I'll ask him about that. But he goes to the Rockets at a time when the Rockets were a very thin staff. He becomes the video coordinator, basically, rises up under Carol Dawson on a staff that was almost incomplete. The Rockets really, in that day and age, had almost nobody in the front office. So he rises up well there. He's expected to be the next general manager, and the Rockets hired Daryl Morey instead as they kind of get lured in by the numbers guy and the Boston Celtics. And Daryl Morey takes the job. And shortly thereafter, he's hired by the San Antonio Spurs. R.C. Buford scoops him up. It's the day after the Spurs actually win the title. They scoop up Lindsey, and he becomes the third guy with Popovich and R.C. Buford in the Spurs front office. Is he a numbers guy? A lot of people have asked yesterday on Twitter and on Facebook, and the answer is I don't think so. However, I would say he's been highly exposed to numbers between the Rockets and the Spurs at a level that we as an organization probably haven't, at least openly. We do use more numbers than people realize, but I'm going to suspect the what he saw in both Houston and San Antonio might be even to another level. I'm not sure that's his forte. I'm not sure that's – I think he's a coach. I think he's a scout a guy, watch a guy, coach a guy, but he definitely has seen that as an option. And, you know, as much as I'm a numbers lover, and I think they're very, very important because they take emotion out of it, they're not the only way to view a player. And so they should be a piece of the pie, but not the entire pie. I would assume that he has them as a piece of the pie. Talking to people around the league on who he is, good guy, seasoned executive. Let's see. Good personality, smart guy. Surprised he's leaving Texas. He does his work. Will run an entire franchise one day. And the vision, most people around the league see is OConnor still running this franchise. Good relationships, they say. Personnel, you know, it's interesting. I didn't see him. I didn't get a huge comments about him as a big player evaluator, but I got him much more as kind of a very good guy at doing the ins and outs of the league. And I would think he thinks he's probably a pretty good player evaluator. Time will tell. San Antonio, he definitely was with some of the best, was probably a part of that. What does it mean for the Jazz future? You know, on the simplest sense, I think it's a statement by the Millers, once again, of a real commitment to winning. The word around the league that surprised most people was that Dennis was making a lot of money in San Antonio, and they were surprised Utah was willing to pay it to get him to come over. So I think this is just another significant bottom line expenditure from the Jazz to try to increase the front office's depth. It does mean, I think it preserves Kevin O'Connor a little bit. I think it gives the Jazz somewhat of a transition plan if they like Dennis Lindsey and O'Connor at some point does retire. You know, we have experienced that the seemingly pieces that never leave, the Jerry Sloans of the world, do at some point step away. And I think, you know, frankly, the Jazz have been close to losing O'Connor a few times recently. And if they had done that, they didn't have necessarily the front office that just scooped into place. They're still probably a little short, but at least they may have the guy that gets into place. And then you're only either bringing in a guy that Dennis is close with, or you're just promoting Walt Perrin and bringing in somebody else at that level in a much better figure. Whereas, you know, had the Jazz, Kevin O'Connor left, then the Jazz were hiring a GM, a somewhat insular organization that doesn't bring a lot of people from the outside, suddenly was probably rebuilding the entire front office. Walt Perrin could have been promoted, but then he's rebuilding almost everything at that point. The Jazz are just an organization that doesn't bring a lot of outside voices. This is an outside voice, and it's a significant outside voice, and it may be the first significant outside voice to the organization either since Walt Perrin in 2001 or since Kevin O'Connor 4 years before that. And that, to me, is the real significance here. A few more questions on Millsap have come in. Could the Jazz offer him more than his extension in free agency? Yes, they could. The extension, as we've talked about, that is being bantied, that is the limit of what they can give him is about a 3-year, $25 million deal in the market, has been a little higher than that. I still, as I talked about yesterday on this podcast, think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays, because part of me, it's not as much money as Ilyasova's 5-year $40. It's not as much money as Anderson's 4-year $36. But the market is slimming, and Millsap's 3-year 25. It, the I'd be surprised if Millsap got anything more in those first 3 years of the deal than 28 or at the most 30. I'd be surprised. I don't see him as a $10 million a year guy. With the way this market is shifting and how it's adjusting, and that someone has to have the space to offer him, and all of those items. And if you just look at the 3 years and say to yourself, what number do you think Millsap's getting? I think it's somewhere probably between 24 and 28. So it's definitely the 25s on the low end, but it's also secured before you start a year and avoid any injury. The issue is really if Paul goes in the open market, I do think he would get a 4-year deal, but the Jazz just don't have that opportunity to offer him that. And so you're really, the last year is the issue on that deal. And that's why, if you're Paul, you don't take it, is because you know you can go get that 4th year, the way Ryan Anderson got a 4th year, if that's the case. But so that's the issue. The $25 million over 3 years is just not that far off. And so, yes, the Jazz can sign him in the offseason, and what they can do is offer him a 4th or 5th year. I'm not sure whether the Jazz are willing to offer him a 4th or a 5th year, but I do think that he would get that 4th year. So really what he's holding out for is that 4th year. A few other questions came in. Is Lindsey a numbers guy? Let's go to those questions. That's from an 1110 Jazz on Twitter. I think I've answered that. I think he's been exposed to it, but I'm not sure that's what he is. From Easy801, will Lindsey bring small market mentality or big market swag? I love the question. I don't really know what it means. I think he just fits the mold. The Jazz, I think if the Jazz were to hire someone, they would come from either Oklahoma City or San Antonio, which are virtually the same thing. And I think that that's where they would find somebody. And so what, I don't know if that's, I guess that's small market mentality, or I don't know what the difference is, frankly. Remind me tomorrow. I want to talk about this whole idea about the big three. One of the questions that Greg Miller got at our event yesterday was, what are we going to do in the league about the super teams? And I have some thoughts on that, so somehow I'll try to remember to get that. The Millsap, a lot of questions on Millsap. Jazzin at Clark, who does a nice job. Millsap extension offer, show of respect and good faith. We're tipping a hand at desired future front court. I think what it shows is that, regardless of what it means for Big Al, I think it just shows that, yeah, it's a tipping of the hand in the sense of how much the Jazz appreciate Millsap, who he is. As Kevin O'Connor says, our DNAs match. And the other one on part of the reason you're not going to extend Jefferson right now is his contract is going to be one where he really just has a salary correction, and he's not going to be, what is he at, $14 million right now? He's not going to come in. You know, you're not giving him. If you're offering Al right now, you're probably insulting him, because with Al you need the market to readjust itself, and Al needs to. He's going to come to the Jazz. He's going to want his full extension of what he can get, and the Jazz are going to say, well, we're not paying you a 3% raise or whatever it is, a 1 point whatever percent raise on $15 million. You know, Al turns out to be, what is Al? Al might be a $10 million player as well, and the rest of the league, you need the rest of the league to suddenly put that number on Al, and then you can discuss it with him. But if you came to Al right now and said, we'll give you 3 or 30, he's going to look at you like you're crazy, and you've probably insulted him. Whereas the Jazz were able to, you know, make a statement to Millsap about what they think of him. All right, there's a ton of stuff out there. It's awesome. It's August 7th. There's a ton of stuff, but it's been 20 minutes. So I'm going to wrap this baby up. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks to all the people at the Jazz sponsorship who told me they listen to this. Tell your friends about it. It's growing. We're about 35% bigger than we were during the end of the regular season, which is really cool to me. And I can't wait for the season to get. Hopefully we grow again. But thanks so much for coming into my office every morning and sharing these moments. And hopefully this is worth your time. See ya.